Hi everybody, Justin here from XOGO, and today I'm going to show you how you can display free date and time, weather, or news widgets on top of your XOGO overlays. I'll go ahead and drop the URLs for these overlays in the comment section down below so you can modify and use them in your own content. Let's go ahead and get started. You're going to see, first of all, that I'm here in Windows 11 and I've got the XOGO Manager application open, and we're going to log into my demo account. Now you'll see that I already have content loaded into the library. I have two playlists and a few players set up. What we're going to do is go up to the hamburger menu in the top left, and we're going to click on overlays. I do not have any overlays currently added in here, so we're going to create one. So first of all, I'm going to jump back into my Mac. Now you don't need to use an Apple device. I'm a marketing person, so I tend to do all my design work on a Mac. I'm going to open up my favorite graphic design application, which is called Sketch. You also could use anything from Canva, Pixelmator, Photoshop, Illustrator. Um, you can create an overlay graphic in pretty much anything nowadays. I've got one started here, and if I click on the artboard, you're going to see that the dimensions for this graphic are 1920 by 1080, and that is the same resolution as a 1080 HD television. So, assuming that my players are connected to 1080 TVs, this is the size that I would want. So let's go ahead and just finish out my overlay graphic. Now you'll see that I've got kind of a nice charcoal color on top with my logo overlaid, and I'm going to click down to the bottom. I'm going to make this bottom one the same color, which I happen to know is hex code 323232. You could make this any color you want. You can make it red if you want. I like this nice branded sort of charcoal look. And then I just have a little text overlay here that says news. Okay, and what we're going to do is export this as a PNG file. It's important that you do PNG, by the way, because PNG is the one sort of graphics file that supports transparency. So this middle section of the overlay graphic that appears to be white is actually going to be transparent. You can see that when we go to export here, at least in this design application, you can see these little checkers. That means it's transparent. Let's go ahead and export this as a PNG. We're going to call it XOGO overlay. Okay, we'll save it to the desktop, and now I can minimize this application. We're going to do a preview of the file, and there it is. And so you see I've got this nice sort of charcoal bars on the top and bottom of the screen. The middle part is clear and transparent, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to click on copy, and now I'm going to jump back into Windows so we can use XOGO Manager again. All right, let's go ahead and replace this file. All right, so now I've got my XOGO overlay graphic that we just created here on the desktop in Windows. And in XOGO Manager, I'm going to click plus new in order to add this overlay. Now again, I'm going to name it XOGO overlay, super creative. And what we're going to do is click on choose background. And when we do that, we're going to get the option to upload a graphic that we want to use as our overlay. Now I'm going to use the one we just created, and it loads up immediately. And here you can see, again, it's exactly what we wanted. We've got our charcoal bars on the top and bottom. This middle section shows up as black, but it's actually transparent. So that's where your, any of the graphics, videos, and URLs in your playlist are going to be playing behind that. So, think of Photoshop, for instance. The overlay is your top layer, and everything else kind of shines through below it, if you will. And now on to the interesting part. So what we can do is click to add a web surface. I like to call them widgets. See, it's called web surface in XOGO Manager. And these are going to be URLs. Now, the interesting thing is you can display lots of different sorts of information as a web surface or widget. For instance, you might have a company stock ticker or days since injury, depending on your industry, that you want to display. That would be up to you to have those URLs and host them. Again, the topic here is the date and time, weather, and news, because we offer those widgets for free currently. So you can go ahead and use them. So where do we get this URL? Again, I'm going to paste 3 of them down in the comments below. I've also got them open here on my desktop on my Mac. And now let's just take a closer look for a moment at the URLs themselves. So what are you going to see? You're going to see it's this nice Azure Web Sites sort of a URL. It's being hosted by us. And this first section you could ignore. the last part of it is a little more important. So what you can do is, since we're doing localized data for date and time and the weather, you can actually import your own GPS coordinates. So this example happens to be set for a location in New Jersey. So if I copy this URL and I go over and paste it into a web browser, you're going to see the local date and time as of right now for New Jersey. And so we've got January 3 and it's 3:33 p.m. But we can customize this a little bit as well. So, if we wanted to change the GPS coordinates, for example, easiest thing we can do is go to Google Maps and just right click on any location in the world. And immediately you're going to see, like right here, you're going to see the GPS coordinates. So I just did Seattle, for instance. So we've got, positive 47, and then a negative 122. So if we wanted to change the location, we could plug those numbers into the URL right here. The other thing we can do is the color. Now I've already got the color set to the same charcoal gray as I'm using in my overlay. And that's just so the date and time blend right into the overlay. If we wanted to, though, we could change this to something else. I'll show you that live. So for instance, we go into the URL. Here's the part where it says BG, that's background, equals 323232. Let's go ahead and change that to a different hex code. There's a lighter gray if we enter all fours, for instance. The other thing we can do is actually a couple of things. You'll see here in font family, we do support all of the web-safe fonts. So if you wanted to change that to Helvetica or Times New Roman, for instance, you could do that here by typing Helvetica in instead of Arial, for example. Font size and AM/PM are the other two factors. So let's go ahead, I'll show you what that looks like. Font size is currently set to 20 in this example. If I change it to 40, for instance, you're gonna see that our font just got a whole lot bigger, right? Now I find that 20 usually works pretty well for displaying on top of a XOGO overlay. So let's switch that back. Other interesting thing is AM/PM is set to true. If I change that to false, then it's going to go to military time, and we're going to see 15:35 instead of 3 p.m. But let's go ahead and change ours back to true. Then it jumps right back into AM/PM. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just copy paste this out of my text editor, jump back into XOGO here, and in XOGO Manager, I'm going to paste in this URL. Okay. And now what you're going to see is it appears on top of my overlay. Now this is pretty neat. Again, I've got it set to the same color as the overlay color. So it's 323232, which is this kind of nice charcoal color. Now I can drag it and drop it around the screen in order to position this date and time where I want. The other things I can do are to adjust the actual height and width. So right now you're going to see this looks a little bit cramped, and the height is pretty high. I don't need it to be 200. Let's try something like 100. So I'm going to enter that in. And the width, it looks like it probably could be longer too, so it's not scrunched into two different lines. So let's make this something like 175. Maybe a bit wider. Let's do 200. Okay. Maybe this one has to be a bit more. I just want to make it wide enough so that it all appears on one line. And there we go. That might be much even, so let's try 400. It's a little bit trial and error. And to me, that looks pretty good. And now it's a little bit too tall, so let's make this maybe 75 pixels tall. Okay, and perfect. So now what I've got is a date and time. It's set up to AM/PM like I wanted it. It's the same color background as my overlay, so it blends right in. And I can drag and drop it around the screen to position it exactly where I want. So I think about here looks good. So let's just run with that. And now let's add a couple more. I know this tutorial might get a little bit long, but I'm going to try to go quickly with the weather and the news. So again, weather, very similar to date and time. You can adjust the GPS coordinates to give you a different location. You can adjust the background color, the font family, font size, and then there's one other thing here, the time and temp. You can adjust to be Fahrenheit or Celsius. So let's give you a live example. I'm going to paste this to a browser, and currently you'll see that this is how it's configured, is Fahrenheit. So it's going to be 20-point Arial font. It's pulling in a Fahrenheit feed. Now, if I delete at the end of the URL, I put a C instead of an F, then I'm getting -2 Celsius. But let's go ahead and leave this one at Fahrenheit. Okay, so that's a preview of what it'll look like. Now let's go into XOGO Manager. And again, I'm going to click on Web Surface. All right, and let's add in our URL. Great. And once again, we're going to drag it to where we want it and then adjust the sizing. So again, this looks pretty tall by default, and it's about the right width, but let's make this a little bit different height. I think maybe probably 75 to 100. Yeah, that looks about right. I think maybe 90 pixels width. It can probably be like 150. Let's see how that looks. And that's pretty sharp. So now I can drag and drop it over to where I want it. And let's say, I think it looks pretty good about there. So again, I've got the date and time now, upper right side of the screen. You know, I've got the local temperature that's appearing to the left of that. And one final thing, let's go ahead and add one final web surface, and that's going to be a news feed. So again, jumping over to my text editor, I've already got this one set up again for font family Arial. Font size, I'm going to reduce a little bit to 17. And then we've got the background color set to the same charcoal gray. Now this news feed is actually getting pulled from PBS. This is a US news source that's free that we pull in. And all we got to do is size this one. Now this one, the height again, I think this one's going to be probably about 75, should look right. We're going to make it much wider so it stretches across most of the bottom of our overlay screen. So I think the width might be 1500 pixels, maybe 16. We'll see how it looks. All right, that looks pretty good to me. Maybe a little bit wider actually. Let's make this 16 and see how it looks. All right, drag this over here. All right, so if I add this now, I think that looks pretty sharp. Maybe I'm going to drag my my date and time over a little bit. Let's make this a little bit less wide. I can drag it a little bit over so it kind of lines up more with the right side of our news feed here. And now I'm just being OCD, but okay, so this is what basically a preview of what our overlay is going to look like. When you're happy with the placement of the URLs, the colors, you know, fonts, the AM, PM time, etc., you're just going to click on Save. So now that we have an overlay set up, we just need to assign it to one or more of our players. So let's go ahead and go back into our list of players. I have one that's running here in Windows 11, so let's click on that one to see its info. I've already got a demo playlist assigned to it. We're going to click on Overlay and choose the XOGO overlay that we just made. Let's click Save. And now, when we open up the player, it's not only going to be playing our playlist, but it's going to be playing our overlay on top of it with the date, time, and the weather and news information that we set up here in XOGO Manager. So what you'll see is I've just got these two graphics, and they're going to be swapping out every 7 seconds as I scheduled them in the XOGO playlist. But full time, you're going to be seeing the overlay on top with our logo, date, time, temperature, and the news. Now, what if I want to get rid of this at any time? I can just go back into my player and go ahead and delete the overlay, click Save, and then within a few minutes, the overlay is going to disappear. I also can, of course, just reboot the player. And now you'll see that it's back to normal and just playing the playlist with no overlay. So I hope that was helpful. Let us know in the comments section down below if you have any questions, or feel free to reach out to us at support.xogo.io, and we'll help you with any questions.